What's up, y'all? I'm Reed the Fishmonger, and today we're gonna fillet up some mutton snapper. First, we're gonna remove the scales from around the collar area. The reason why we're removing the scales off of the wings before filleting it is it's a lot easier to get the scales off while it's still a whole fish versus after filleting. All right, got some gorgeous snapper there. I'm gonna fillet the first one, going through the instructions a little quicker. Then the second one, we're gonna slow it down for you. We're gonna pick up the fin, go behind the head at an angle. Tip of the knife right at that opening, slide all the way down. Rest our knife right on top of the skeleton, pull towards the head. Tip of the knife, base of the ribs, angle it slightly up. That just separated the connection the pin bones made to the ribs. Go to the top of the spine, surf down those ribs. Look at that. No meat lost. It's a thing of beauty. Love that noise. Flip it over, pick up the fin, go behind the head at an angle, flip it around, wipe off your scales, rest our knife right on top of the skeleton, hit the second side, tip of the knife, base of the ribs, slightly up, separate the connection the pin bones make to the ribs, and there's our beautiful mutton snapper fillet. There's all the rib bones left on the skeleton. No meat loss on that fish. That is a thing of beauty right there. Let's put that off to the side. We're still gonna have to remove the wings off of that. All right, we're not fully done here. We've got a little bit of this membrane right here. That's totally fine right there as long as there's no bone in there, which there is not. We're going to gently shave off that little bit of membrane, and now we're done. That's ready for the display case. Now this membrane is edible, so if you want, you can just go like that. That's totally fine. For aesthetics, a lot of people like taking it off, but on smaller snappers, it is tender. When they get larger, like a big cubera or a huge mutton snapper, that might be a little chewy. You might want to shave it off thin, but as it is right there on these smaller sized muttons, that is, you're not even gonna notice it's there. So you might as well save the meat. All right. On the next mutton snapper, we're gonna slow it down a little bit for you in case the first one you weren't able to follow along as well. We're gonna pick up the fin. Now when we go behind the head at an angle, you can see the scales. So if you're at a hard angle and you're going underneath the scales, it is a lot easier. We wanna fully separate out that piece right there. Now when we made our incision behind the head, we went at a hard angle. Our knife was not like this. You'd lose out on all kinds of meat back there. So we're at a hard angle, sliding down, and you can see we hooked forward towards the head. That's because there's some meat in there that you don't want to lose also. Now we can stick the tip of our knife right at that opening and slide down. Notice how my knife is almost at a 180-degree angle. If you ever see people making their line like this, you'll notice it takes them a lot longer than it just took me, just sliding down. If you ever cut wrapping paper and you got that point where it just starts gliding super easily, that satisfying motion, that's what you get holding your knife like this. You will never get it holding your knife like that. To get that glide, it has to be almost at a 180-degree angle, and when you get it, you're gonna do it every time. It's so satisfying. Now that we've got that opening, we're gonna wiggle our knife right in there. Just make sure it's resting right on top of the skeleton. So all we did was just rest it right on top of the skeleton. Now we're gonna pull towards the head. Knowing your knife is resting right on top of the skeleton, you know you're not losing out on any meat. It's super easy. Now we're just gonna make sure we got all the way to the halfway point being the center spine. Now we're gonna stick the tip of our knife at the base of the ribs. Make sure your knife's not levitating like this. You wanna make sure it's pushing on the skeleton like that. Angle your knife slightly up like this. Separate the connection the pin bones make to the ribs. Take the tip of your knife, go to the top of that spine. You can dip down and hit the other side without losing any of the meat. If you just went straight over, you would lose a good amount of meat on the second side. And these hours out of the water mutton snapper are a high value fish at Captain Clay & Son Seafood Market, and we want to make sure we're not losing out on any of that delicious mutton snapper meat for our customers. So now we hit the second side. We separated the connection the pin bones make to the ribs. Now what you want to do is so you can feel the pin bones. You can feel where they were connected to the ribs. You want to stick your knife on the other side of those and just wiggle it on down. There's your beautiful mutton snapper fillet. All the ribs are left on the skeleton. None of them are in the fillet. Now, whether you choose to or not, you can circle back around and shave off this membrane. And there's your beautiful mutton snapper fillet with no rib bones left in that fillet. All right, let's hit the second side. Flip it over, pick up the fin. We're gonna go behind the head at an angle. So our knife's not like this, it's like this. And make sure you get that meat behind the head of those mutton snappers. So it's also not like this. You wanna be up in that head, not losing out on any of that delicious mutton snapper meat. Flip it around. Tip of the knife right at that opening, almost 180-degree angle, and just slide all the way down. Now we can rest our knife on the skeleton after you wiggle your knife in there. And I push on the skeleton a little bit. What that does is it lifts the spine. See how it's drooping like that? And then when I push on that rib area, it lifts it up a little bit. And now that we're to the center, we can use the tip of our knife, go to the top of that spine, tip of the knife, base of the ribs, angle it slightly up. Make sure your knife's not floating like this, but resting like that. Angled slightly up like this, not like that, slightly up like this. And what you just did was separate the connection the pin bones make to the ribs. Right here, you can see those little spikes. Those are the pin bones that are in the fillet, and those are little pieces of them left that was connected to the rib cage right here. Now you can stick the tip of your knife on the second side of that spine, scraping that skeleton, making sure you're not losing any of your meat. Let's wipe those scales off. Now we can rest our knife right on that rib cage. And when you're sliding down the ribs, it'll be super easy to just cut through and lose all that belly meat. So another method you can use is pull the fillet towards you, not losing any of the meat, and the rib bones are left there. This time we did leave a couple of the rib bones in our fillet, super easy to cut out. We're gonna shave right underneath there. Take your time with it, make sure you don't lose any of that delicious mutton snapper meat. See how thin that is? That's what you want. And again, this isn't a huge mutton snapper. This membrane is edible. The point where it's not edible is, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but there is a faint line right here. And that's the line you want to cut down on. And there's our beautiful mutton snapper. Now let's remove those wings. Open that up. This bone right here is resting on top of this bone. They are not actually connected. So we can take our knife, wiggle right underneath that bone, then puncture that membrane, come right underneath the throat. Now that's detached. Let's do the same thing to the other side. You can puncture the membrane first if you want. Either way works. Now we're going to rest our knife right there, slide right underneath that floating bone, and beautiful. There's one wing. And there's the next wing. One last thing we can do to utilize meat on this mutton snapper is we can either fully just cut out these rib bones, because on these smaller fish they are easier to cut out, or we can slide our knife underneath the rib bones and take the meat out from underneath them. So we're gonna do both of those. Show you both options. All right. And there's the meat that was underneath the ribs on this mutton snapper. You can take kitchen shears and go to the base of those ribs and cut. You'll find a sweet spot where it cuts through them easier. And you just take those whole ribs out and you can cook them with the bones in and just eat the meat around the bones. It's not a ton of meat, so I personally just take this little piece out. You have membrane right here, just like ribs, and you're gonna wanna shave that off. And it's delicious meat. Again, on this cut, I usually go bone out just because it's easier. It's not a lot of meat. You're not losing out on much by going bone out. There is still some meat left on this skeleton. You can use that for stocks, broths, crab traps, whatever you got going on. But the bulk is right here. You guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a killer day. See you soon.